the worst. Let's be very clear, on 1st July, there is a technology breakdown. Let's assume from there, it's better. And tax administration is not very friendly. Now, what should you do? Now, government should understand, and also the people agencies which implement this law, because these are the two unknown fears and assessee is not responsible for that. If they're going to push this law, they let them push on dates, because they also don't have a choice. 1st July can't be deferred, and by deferring it by 60 days, technology can't come into place in a very stupid way. It's not going to happen. If it has not come for 6 months or 9 months, it will not come on the 11th month also. It will take its own sweet time. So 60-day window for addressing these, and you can't say within 60 days, all your officers should unite together and they should get a new era of cohesion. It's not like you can change minds like you change shirts. It doesn't happen. Everything takes time. And that's why the window, I'm telling you, window of pushing it to September doesn't serve trade's interest also. Let's get into it. At some point of time, now one thing is clear, GST is irreversible. So get into it at some point of time. Now these two fears, how do we address? Start from the assessee. I would request each one of you, whether you like, I know there is a cost to it or not, because it's an initial phase or a transition phase. Please maintain dual compliances at your end. What do I mean by dual compliances? Have, as you have today a manual compliance or a semi-technology compliance, ensure your compliances are the same way as you have been doing it today. Don't migrate by leaving what you have been doing. And if the migration doesn't register or absorb the data the way you want, you will not have anything to show that you have complied with the law. So till such time there is an assurance that we have aligned. It may easily take a year. See, all these fears are fears which can be remedied at some point of time. It's not that fears will live for next century, no. So till migration and there is an assurance that everything works, have your documentation at your end the way you have been preparing yourselves as of now. That's the first request I make to the trade. Number one. Number two, from your end, see, anybody will look only for the evidence. Court wants only evidence. From your end, you ensure to whatever extent possible you are able to comply with the technological requirements, you should comply it and document it. There must be a pakka documentation in place to say, this is how I have integrated myself. I have done my job. If my supplier doesn't integrate, I can't be at peril. Because it puts an onus of reconciliation by all the three together. The law says your anterior and the subsequent stage should reconcile yourself together. All the three should make it seamless. This is how it works in patches. So that from the start to the end, everything is connected so that the government is able to say that there is no loss of credit. This is how the law works. So that's the second effort you have to be prepared with. Third, please document your grievances as it happens. And this is the role, I think, trade bodies at this point of, you may have to work day and night for the next few months. Document the documented grievances as long as it's the legitimate grievance of a trade and not an individual. Document it as a trade problem. This is the concern of the trade. This trade is facing this problem. And the fourth, ensure this is registered with the GST Council. Whether they act, they don't act, you should push it. So, follow the existing route, number one, existing model. Do whatever compliance the law says, attempt it at your best of your ability, so that you are not found fault with. 3, register your grievance with the trade body. And 4, the trade body should assimilate it. If it is a trade problem, deposit or document it with the GST Council. These are the 4 steps on the technology front. Because, see, what is technology? Technology is not doing transaction. A done transaction is documented in technology. Okay, let's be very clear about our problem. Once you understand the problem, you can find the solution. We should not just be assuming a problem and say there is no solution. There is a solution for every problem. So technology only documents a transaction. So if it's not able to capture it for its own reasons of non-readiness, doesn't mean transaction cannot happen or should not happen. It should happen the way it has happened in the past. So this 4 steps is something very, very critical. You need to plan yourself when you do a transition to technology. Now come to tax administration. There is, at least in the host of meetings which have been addressing across, our first surprise is the federal partners working together. They have worked and passed this law. Our second surprise is GST Council performing its job. I'm telling you how one instance I'll tell you how suppose there is an exemption notification, there is a problem during budget. You register your grievance saying this ought to be the law and this is how the law is. 10 years back, it will take one more budget for it to get remedied. 2 years back, few months from now, you could get a solution depending upon the level of influence and connect you have with the administration. But this time, I'll give you one small example. See, some industries he was saying, cars are going to cost more. They are putting 28% on white goods. The promise in the GST budget was it is 18%. But they made it 28%. Why? We were paying indirect taxes of 33% on our products. Many of them have come to 12 and 18. How do you bridge this gap? 6.5 lakh crores is what we have been earning. Suddenly it can't become 3.5 lakh crores. What do you do for the 3 crores? So white goods have been pushed to 28 to only ensure that there is a balance. And the economy is not growing at 20%. No economy in any part of the world is growing at 20%. So these are all the economic issues on rates. But what did GST Council do? Some which were non-manufacturing activities not liable to duty were pushed to 28. I'm giving you an example, retrading tires. A normal tire and a retraded tire under the GST regime, the price difference is only 1,000 rupees. So the retrading industry will go out of business. You lodge a complaint to the GST Council. 11th June they come out with a clarification saying that we made a mistake. Anything in old excise law, there is something called a deemed manufacture. Processes which were not manufactured were deemed to be manufactured because you can inflict excise duty. And they said, therefore, it is supply of goods under the GST regime. Now, 11th GST Council passes and removes it, saying that, I think that's the mistake we have made. Actual manufacture will be supply of goods. All deemed manufacturer will move out and become mere processes, and therefore they are service. And because they are service, it is taxable at 18%. So today, regular tire is 28%, and the retreated tire is 18%. If you get a tire, it all happened in 12 days' time. From the day you lodged your grievance, this is the problem. Within 12 days, the council has addressed it, saying that the mistake is conceptual. So this redressal is now happening. Let's not take every complaint of tax administration to the GST Council, no. But if there are serious issues in tax administration, whether it is regional or state-wise or whatever it is, please calibrate it without, ultimately you can't fight an officer in this country. Don't do that. It's as difficult as fighting with your spouse, whichever may be. So we should not be picking up, we are no longer in an era where we can afford to fight. Diplomacy has come down to the level that you have to handle a newborn kid with a lot of diplomacy. So diplomacy is now the order of the day. So don't fight. But doesn't mean that you cannot lodge your complaints. So if there is going to be an issue on tax administration, the effective link of trade body and GST, the next 9 months is going to be very relevant. Please use it effectively. Now, what is the remedy available to you? Simple. Please ensure whatever happens to the system, don't bother. Please ensure you pay your taxes properly. I think that is something which you can do. Once that bottom line gets addressed, there is a provision in this law, section 180 or 176, there is a provision which says matters of concern which the GST Council feels and flags it as an issue, then GST Council can recommend all those defaults are condonable and there is no penalty at all. There is a provision in the law. I'm talking all this on the basis of strength of a law. We don't have to now go and beg or seek pardon. That law says if there are genuine issues which the GST Council perceives it to be genuine, he can recommend saying that these issues needs to be condoned and therefore cannot be penalized. So what is the bottom line on 1st July? 1st July bottom line, please maintain the books which you have been. Please pay the taxes which you are required to pay. These two, if you do properly, rest can be handled over a period of time. I think I'm giving you some sort of an assurance, contrary to the various lectures you would have heard all these months everywhere. We need to step in. How can you step in with fears? Don't have fears. These are the true threshold requirements, right? So these four players, if they align and there is a cohesion, there could be a possible good tax compliance. This is one part. Now coming to the law, I'll take the next 30-40 minutes on the critical issues which you are likely to face. The first, the first sutra or the mantra you should bear it in mind is, as on date, you import parts of computer, you paid import duty. You assembled the computer, you paid excise duty. You sold the computer, you paid VAT. You serviced the computer, you paid service tax. You allowed the computer to enter into a state, you paid entry tax. You allowed the computer to cross through a municipal area, you paid octroi. Then you had BAT duty, SAT duty, MAT duty. So your invoice will have one line description, one pricing and 11 taxes. This is the regime in which we are used to till date. Now it's all integrated. See, there is a vertical integration and there is a horizontal integration. All put together, you will have only a CGST and a SGST or an IGST. These are the three constituent, but for some cess here and there in some cases. But what is important? How this integration has happened? How 11 levies became one? Please bear it in mind, hereafter the tax is only on supply. The word that should get registered in our hearts, supply of goods, supply of services. And what do you mean by that? If you need to know supply, you must also know the following. You must be familiar with composite supply, mixed supply, zero rated supply, exempted supply, non-taxable supply, inward supply, outward supply, and principal supply. So supply has all these avatars. It's not just simple supply. But there is something called supply which is independent in its own description. Section 7 of the CGST Act defines it. So supply today includes broadly our understanding any economic activity, unless otherwise it is excluded. The shortest way to understand, you do an economic transaction, economic activity, then you will fall under GST. Except for the fact you'll have to find out whether you are excluded. Because sale, barter, exchange, license, every damn thing under the sun is supply now. Then it also includes, it says for furtherance of business, but in the case of imports, it need not be for furtherance of business. So personal imports are also under GST. Unless otherwise you stand exempted in some categories. That's one lesson. Now, most important in this supply, before we go to composite and all, in supplies, there are 3-4 areas where you need to understand related party transaction, distinct person transaction, import transaction from your own establishment sitting outside India. These are 3 major areas which is new in this supply regime. Related party, it's almost similar to what we have been doing for 30, 40 years. Not a problem. Almost, but for here and there, which is something which we are capable of handling it. This distinct party is an important concept. What do you mean by distinct persons? This law says your head office in Chennai and your factories in Calcutta and Maharashtra, your warehouses in Chandigarh and Karnataka, your depots and dealer premises in Orissa and Chhattisgarh will all be construed as distinct persons, will be deemed to be distinct persons. And why do they say so? They say so because this is a law involving state power and union power. And therefore, if it is one law tax at the union level, you don't have to do this dissection. It's like it's not difficult, or it's not something which is new for the first time. In a cross-border transaction in income tax, in a cross-border transaction in the service tax, we are used to this. Service from head office to a branch in a cross-border is tested as an independent transaction for international taxation purposes, for transfer pricing purposes. Similarly, this law says you are a distinct person. Now, what are the issues that come out of distinct persons? I'll just tell you in 5 minutes' time, in a few minutes' time. So this is one area which is new in this chapter, distinct person concept. The problems which can arise out of it is something which we need to bear it in mind. Then comes, we saw related person, we saw distinct person. Similar to that is the import, when you do it from your own establishments located from outside India. That is similar to related person. That is something which we have understood it in Service Tax Act and therefore easily understandable. These are the three basic framework concepts which you should understand. Now we move to the next. Next, if you move, composite supply, mixed supply, works contract, and pure service contract. There's going to be a lot of debate with these four terms. Works contract, composite supply, mixed supply, and pure service. That's going to be an issue. What is that issue? After the 46th Amendment, we have this Article 366(29)A has been passed to say, defining what is works contract. There is enough confusion prior to that, but now that got resolved after the 46th Amendment, 46th Constitutional Amendment, saying that in a works contract, it's a mixture of both goods and sweat. And therefore, states are empowered to dissect what was an integrated goods and sweat. States are empowered to dissect and tax the goods, and union is entitled to dissect and tax the services. This is the concept of works contract. And it made no distinction between movable and immovable. Construction, it's a works contract. Repairing a car is also a works contract. But now this regime says, repairing a car is a composite contract. So, without deleting 366(29)A, it's a lapse. See, there's nothing. When they have drafted all these things, they could have deleted that. Now they don't want to go back to Parliament on GST. Very simple. We did voice it. It's such a simple thing. But no. If we take something to GST, they are worried the whole thing will be dragged back. So whatever has happened, it's happened. Legally, it's unconstitutional. This concept of a composite contract will be straight away hit as unconstitutional in terms of 366(29)AB. But my advice to the trade is, don't waste your time. You will succeed or lose after 15 years. By then, GST would have gone into some other mode. See, we all fought on hotel cases. Some courts held in our favor, some courts held in against us, and you have all been paying only 2 taxes. And matters are all pending in Supreme Court, and we are getting into GST on 1st July. So it makes no sense to challenge all this. Arrange your affairs as the law is. That's my suggestion. No fight on constitutionality. You should fight only on interpretative issues, not on constitutionality. So now what this law says, works contract is confined only to immovables. All movables have been taken out of works contract and bundled into the composite contract. So we are back to the Hindustan aeronautic days under this law. It says, what is a composite contract? The essence of a composite contract is a natural bundling of goods. That's the test. Natural bundling of, there again there are problems. It uses the expression taxable services. So whether exempted services will be part, all that minuscule, minute interpretation, we'll do it in a different lecture. But the big picture you must understand, because these are, when you go on first, you should be familiar with all these basic structures. That gives you the confidence to handle the law. Now, they are using two new expressions, composite supply and mixed supply. What is the difference between the two? Because mixed supply says every supply excluding composite supply. So you must understand what is composite supply, only then you can understand mixed supply. I'll give you some, in fact they give illustrations in the act itself. And it's a very justified illustration. But let's put it in a very simple way. This hotel, assuming bread suffers say 12% and jam suffers 18%, assuming. Then this hotel places an order on bread and jam with the dealer. The supplier has a choice to bill bread separately and jam separately, separate pricing, in which case he can put 12% for bread and 18% for jam. Now he wants to be smart. He doesn't want his profit to be known on bread or jam. So he integrates them and issues a single invoice, single pricing of bread and jam. Then the law says it's a mixed price. It's a mixed supply. And therefore, it should suffer the highest of rates, which is 18%. Now, the hotel serves the same bread and jam across the table to us. Do we have a choice to say, I will take bread from this convention center and jam from the GRT Grand? We don't have a choice. So you order it as bread, butter and jam. And therefore it is a natural bundling of goods. And because it's a natural bundling, the law says the same bread, butter and jam becomes a composite supply of goods. So, same goods, different transactions. One will take the texture and color as mixed goods. One will take the color and texture of composite goods. So this is, now all your plant and machinery, all turnkey contracts are now going to be now composite contracts, not works contract. Except building, any turnkey machinery contract will be now a composite contract. So whether it is a supply contract or a service contract, whether your cross-fall bridge is working or not, these are all the new regime which you need to train your mind to understand your business. When you put up a factory or when you are putting up a factory for somebody else, works contract is now confined only to immovables and that too only to buildings. So this is one major development in this law. Now the fourth component is pure service contract. You have a third animal also coming here. What do you mean by that? So we have told you what is WCT, we have told you what is composite, we have told you what is mixture. The fourth is pure service contract. What do you mean by that? If you now do a repair of a car, it was earlier works contract, now it is a composite contract. Now you repair the body with a stent with a doctor. That is repairing a car. Repairing the body, you go to the doctor and he puts a stent. Is it a works contract or a composite contract under GST? Will be a question. The decision so far rendered, starting from BSNL, makes a distinction. It puts a third variation. It says, both are only repair, we agree. But repairing a car is a works contract, old regime, and a composite contract, new regime. But repairing a heart is only still a pure service contract and not a works contract or a composite contract. Why? Justice Rumapal says in her judgment, which is now the law which is followed in several judgments, at least 4 or 5 judgments, we have ourselves succeeded in different courts. And 7 other sky courts are trying this again. The difference is, in the first case, in a annual maintenance contract, there is consensus ad idem between the parties to decide what they want to fit in on goods. Whereas in the second contract with the doctor, you don't sit and debate with the doctor, show me all the stents you have. I will test, see which stent is good, and I will choose my stent. You don't have a choice there. The doctor as a course of procedure inserts the sense on the strength of his medical advice. So in the absence of a consensus, Justice Romapal says, that is not a sale contract or a works contract. It becomes a pure service contract, notwithstanding the fact that there is a transfer of goods in it. You come to us for a legal opinion, 100-page opinion we give and dish it out. Can I say that I should tax you for it's a composite contract of service and supply because 100 papers are given to you? You have to pay tax on, if suppose my service, we are all on reverse charge. So one intelligent officer can say, no, we don't want to go to reverse charge. 100 papers you are given because composite contract says principal supply. Principal supply is paper. Paper is taxable at 18%. So they issue a notice to me and Mr. Dattar and say, please pay 18% on this, on the opinion, not on the paper. Is it possible? Now, they say, you have not come to me for a paper. Paper is a tool in which I give my service. I give my service in that form. So don't worry about the form. So this is going to be the fourth dispensation in the GST regime. So when it comes to supply, these are the 3-4 important milestones which you need to be familiar with. Now we go to the next subject. 3 important changes have happened. High sea sales, sale in the course of import, transit sales, and coastal state sales. These are the 4 major development in this law. The first 3 under the old regime stands exempted. High sea sales is not taxable. Sale in the course of import is not taxable. Transit sale is not taxable, subject to giving E1 and C1 forms. And the coastal state sale, we have already succeeded in Gujarat and Andhra and in a few places, matter is pending in the Supreme Court, saying that it's a non-taxable sale under the CST. Because CST Act, unlike service tax and the income tax and other act, they have not amended to include the Territorial Waters Act as part of their regime, and therefore there is no CST. We have succeeded. All the 4 have been addressed in this. Henceforth, high sea sales and sale in the course of import will be an IGST sale. It's very important. And in fact, car importers and exporters, they have problem. 2 high sea sales, whether 2 IGST or 1 IGST and 1 SGST or CGST, debate is going on. We're doing one project for somebody in Bangalore. Very interesting issues. How do you document your bill of entry? There is a scope for an interpretative effort there. So, now bottom line, these are all taxable. When it comes to transit sale, Act very clearly says build to, ship to is a concept. So, A sells it to B and consign it to C. The law follows the destination of the goods. That's the GST law. Therefore, A will bill B. So, the state in which B is located will be the destination state for taxation. And B bills C. Then between B and C, C becomes the destination state for taxation. A's transaction to C does not become the destination state for taxation. There's a huge change in this law. Because you make the law seamless only when goods can follow. All right, what do you say for services? This is all clear in the law for goods. Suppose you do the same. A from Maharashtra places a service order on, B from Maharashtra places a service on A and Delhi, asking him to execute it in C in Calcutta. Bill to, ship to. So, will the same course follow? When I take head office, branch office, when I want to spend some 10 minutes on that. So, I will discuss this issue there. So, but bear it in mind, all the 3 sales are now taxable sales. They are no longer exempted regime. They have gone out of it. And the last one is the coastal state sale. What do you mean by coastal state sale? You do it as a sale or a purchase from here to Bombay, Gujarat to Bombay High, Andhra Pradesh to Kakinada. The law today is it is not a taxable sale. But section 9 of the IGST very clearly says that coastal state will conceive this as a CGST, SGST sale. So all the 4 transactions which were outside the basket has been brought into the GST basket. Now we go to the next one. 3 more terms. See, you have to familiarize yourself with these terminologies. You may have one specific problem which will address it. More than addressing specific problem, the basic picture of the act needs to, you should have a grip over it. Because that is one more unknown fear. So many new terms are there. Because there are so many new terms, you get a fear. How do we go? But why we need this law? In fact, yeah, one senior counsel in Delhi was saying, at 70, 75, why should I be reading this law? That it's your choice, but we can't say that at this point of time. Maybe the next version or generation of GST, when it comes after 2 decades, I think both of us can afford to say, no, we don't have to know this law. But this is the problem. Why know it with all these new terms? There are a lot of new terms in this. New terms means new dimensions. Because you are handling 2 partners of taxing partners together in one legislation. Though they are different legislations, they are 2 halves of the same dispensation. So you need to know it together. Now, 3 terms you must be extremely thorough about. Place of business, fixed establishment, and nexus establishment. These are the 3 important doctrines in this. The foundation, you can understand supply rules only when you understand this correctly. You cannot read supply rules diversing these 3 formulas. So the law says default rule is the place of business. That where you take a registration will be your destination. That's the first rule. Where you are going to have multiple activities, or you have a registration in one place but have an activity elsewhere. Registration is just, it's like Cyprus having one head office, nothing else. An activity happening in Netherlands. So similar to it, on some sentimental reason, you have your head office in your village, but do nothing else, but have rest of your activity in some other state. Then it says fixed establishment. What do you mean by fixed? It defines a fixed establishment. It doesn't leave it to courts to decide. It makes it very clear where relative continuous activity is happening, number 1. And 2, technical resources and machine resources are employed to work. Fixed establishment is not having a 10 by 10 Banba Bazaar type shop there to say, I have a fixed establishment. You need to pass these 2 musters. So that's the say. So you have a place of business from where you do the activity, no problem. You have a place of business but do the activity from fixed establishment, then you have to move to fixed establishment. The last third, you have multiple areas of operation, too many people. You have one contract, say, to be executed in Vizag. Maharashtra executes it, Andhra executes it, Karnataka executes it, different segment. Now, which should be the place? It says, nexus theory. All of us do in cross-border transaction, the highest amount of transaction in the principal transaction. So these are the 3 key terminologies you should be familiar with before you start addressing supply rules. I'm putting the foundation to take you into the supply rules. So this is important. Now we'll get into the supply rules. What does supply rules say? See, we are not unfamiliar with this because we had it in a shorter run, in a miniature form under the service tax regime, point of taxation rules. Time, place, or something which time rules and place rules were there even under the old regime. But under the new regime, this is exactly what it says. Basically, this is the advice I want to give it to the trade. One cardinal tax, one sutra you must bear it in mind. As far as possible, see, if you have multi-locational, place of supply happens, confusion in place of supply will arise only when you have multi-locational activities. Otherwise, there is no problem. If you're going to operate on a single state, you don't have an issue. If you have multi-state problems, then you have place of supply issues coming up. Now, what is the advice you need to therefore be ready with? First, simple advice. Please ensure and please avoid as far as possible IGST transactions. That's one important, how far it is possible, it depends on your abilities. But design your contracts as much as possible to make it as a non-IGST transaction. That's one cardinal principle. And two, avoid as much as possible ISD, transfer of credit through ISD. These two, if your technology can be handled at some point of time, don't bother. If whole world doesn't work on technology, what will you do? Therefore, will they say that everybody will be penalized? Then there will not be enough officers to pass orders against you. So those big problems can be handled easily. Let's come to the brass tacks issue which we need to confront in your basic structuring of your business. These are two principles you should ever follow if you have to have a trouble-free GST to the extent possible. To the extent, see, nothing is, somebody was asking, I have 40,000 dealers across India. You can never get IGST dispensed with. I can't say everything should be in one state. It's not possible. So, what do you mean by that? Take it to the location. See, this law, one of the sutras which you need to bear, we are moving out from the regime of movement of goods or origin state taxation to a destination-based taxation. This is a major change in the GST scenario. Now, what do you mean by that? You're talking of origin-based to destination-based. How is it so relevant? Today, service tax revenue to the union is contributed only by 6 states, like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. 80% of the service tax revenue comes out of 6 states, because rest of the states are only consuming states, not performing states. How did GST succeed? Why Bihar and Telangana and Chhattisgarh should sit a special session and pass the bill? Hitherto they were not getting any taxes, now they are going to get taxes. Why should they not pass a bill then? As simple as that. So, from an origin base, you move to a destination based taxation. Why should we move? That's the question. Why not we stick to origin base? For 2 reasons we have moved. Reason 1, economic activities flow forward. It doesn't flow backward. That's simple common sense. And GST is a seamless link where you need to pay the taxes at the anterior stage, take credit, and now pass it on. No, no more excise, no more VAT, this is permissible, that is not permissible. No, it's one basket taxation. So everybody in the supply chain should bear the taxes and pass the taxes. So credit flow can be easily handled only when the law moves forward, not when it moves backward. This is the essence of GST. Why did we shift from origin based to destination based? We moved to destination based, only then capital goods credit can be subsumed. The last consumer of a paste sitting in his house should have subsumed the taxes at the anterior stage. How can you do it if it's going to be origin based? How will you pass credit from one state to another state? All this is not possible. Therefore, they have made it destination based. Simple. And the economic thought process is, if you allow a tax from an origin based to destination based and make it a consumption tax, consumption people everywhere has to consume. You don't have to produce an Audi car in Patna, but you will have a buyer of an Audi car in Patna. So if you make the taxation base as a consumer-based tax, there will be an economic activity happening around in that state for an economic progress. So these are all the principles in which we have moved out of origin-based taxation to destination-based taxation. So this is the order. It's inevitable. We need to face it. Now the point is, how do we face it? So avoid IGST and make it CGST. Why do I say? Take the case of a head office. This is the major issue which all of you, I think anybody here will have one head office and one branch office elsewhere. Don't say I'm just sitting in my shop in one window and then doing my dispensation. Then you don't need any class. You simply have to go and hook yourself to the technology and pay the taxes. You need a class only when you go beyond that. What is happening now? Head office is in, say, Chennai. You have factories, warehouses, dealer points, agents located all over the country. The supply rules say, the supply rules have classified the activities into two broad baskets. Wherever it has identified the activity as multi-locational, then it says where you have to pay the tax. For example, immovable property. It says wherever the property is located. Event management, wherever the performance of the management event has taken place. So it has identified the supply rules in such a way where it is possible for it. Transportation, AMC contracts, purchase orders, your service vendor obligations, banking, insurance, it's silent. Where you have multiple operations dependent on a single agency in your industrial stream, supply rules doesn't take the burden of identifying where you should pay taxes. So therefore, it is double-edged. I want you all to be very careful here. You go for a licensing of a software, 500 licenses you obtain across India. Where will you pay the taxes? You are servicing 500 licenses across India. Where will you pay the taxes? You are receiving transport goods to a particular location of a factory, but receiving the invoices in the head office. Where will you pay the taxes? Because head office and factory are now distinct persons under the GST law. That's the problem. That's why they say interstate stock transfer, you need to pay taxes. A stock transfer within Tamil Nadu, no taxes. But interstate, why? Goods and the credit should flow to the destination. How do you allow the goods and the credit to flow into the destination? Only when you pay. It therefore says, if it is a taxable goods or a taxable services, they say, I will accept your invoice value blindly. If not, I will start examining the price, because the intrinsic value of the goods should travel back into that state. So these are all the minor issues into it. But big picture is, in a multi-locational sale, our advice would be, head office can have an MSA, but the locations which receive the destination consumption should raise the purchase order. Even head office can pay and cross-charge, no issues. But purchase order and receipt should be destination based. Don't make it as easy, convenient, central location based. If you're going to make it central location based, you inherit the tax into Tamil Nadu as a head office, addresses transport for 10 states. And he puts a tax of say 5 crores into the bill. So Tamil Nadu head office pays 5 crores. But head office has not received one lorry. So it's under an obligation to transfer this 5 crores elsewhere. Our guys in Tamil Nadu will dance. Why this 5 crores is moving out of Tamil Nadu? Will you question or not? So these are all problems which you should understand. You can't blame the law for it. You should design your contracts. All contracts need a review. You would have all done it by now. It doesn't matter 12 days away or 1 month away. By now you would have done it. But this caution is elementary. Your fear is head office should have a control. Let head office have a control. No problem. Let it have an MSA. See, what do we do in global contracts? US parent entity will always have the power of MSA and overriding power. But purchase orders will always be triggered by Netherlands, India, Singapore, Japan, Malaysia, Turkey, etc., etc. X of US, Y of US will enter into an MSA. But orders will be raised by the respective jurisdictional countries. Same method needs to be followed if you are doing a multi-locational sale. I'll tell you the reason. There are 3 problems which are likely to confront if you don't do it. One is transferring the credit. That's one major area of concern. 2, cross-charging the value. Because they will say, I'll give you one example at that. And the 3, one is transferring the credit, second is the cross-charging of the value, and third, of course, if you are an exempted unit, if you're like a hospital, then the problems only multiply. These are the 3 areas: credit, cross-charge, and exemptions in a place of supply rules involving multi-locational. Now, how do we, therefore, what are we saying? 12, 15, I'll write. 10 minutes more. 2-3 more issues. Now, if it is inevitable, so you try to locate it to the location is one answer. The alternative answer is, suppose it is inevitable. No, nothing doing, I want to have a control. It's not 40,000 people, how do I do? Then you must know when to do ISD and when to do cross-charge. You can't do one over the other. It's not a toss of a coin, no. When third party provides the service to the location and you prices a bill on head office, do an ISD, because there is no value addition from the head office. But if head office is going to add value to the third party and then do a service itself, for example, a banking loan is obtained for a particular factory, then the board sits on it and then facilitates and then processes are done. Will you do a cross-charge or will you do an ISD? Because it involves the role of a head office also there. But it's advisable to do cross-charge for the simple reason every state will be happy to get cash rather than credit. Credit means it's like sitting in the bank account. They can only say that this much of credit is available in the state. It doesn't run through as cash. So, if you still want to transfer credit, avoid ISD as much as possible and make it into a cross-charge. Where only then states are going to leave you. But still, 2 states will be fighting. Tamil Nadu will say, why are you parting with 1 crore? And to confound it, if Andhra, you are going to transfer it to ISD, Andhra will say, Tamil Nadu has lost 1 crore, but I have not received 1 crore of cash in my books. They are not going to accept it. So, this is one area, a serious area of concern for most of the industries. Okay. Now 2, the second problem in the supply rules is where your works are happening simultaneously in more than 1 states. For example, telecom. You have one terminal connected to Tamil Nadu, another terminal connected to Andhra Pradesh. There is a tiebreaker rule in the GST supply policy, supply rules. They are saying how you have to do it, apportion and all those things. So whether you have to pass it through IST route or whether through the cross, a big process step is being conceived. But this is one major area in a supply rule. 3, employer-employee service tax. Today there is no service tax on employee because you fall under Schedule 3. But if head office is going to cross-charge its branches, what do you mean by cross-charge? Every head office is responsible for banking, financial operations, audit operations. These are all central operations. So it has a duty to apportion its value to the respective branches because it is a destination-based tax. So when it apportions, should the cost of salaries of the employees be part of the value or not will be one question. Employee service cost is not service taxable. But whether it should be part of the value is one. I'm giving you big picture problems common to almost everyone. It's a problem of the trade which we've been working on it for a few months, and these are the problems which we face on a day-to-day basis. How do you transfer this credit? is one major issue which is slowly emerging. So what happens if it is a taxable industry? No problem. I am talking of a case where you have 30 hospitals across India and the head office in Chennai. Once hospital is an exempted industry, but banking is not exempted, insurance is not exempted, audit is not exempted. So what happens if it allocates? Then each state will say, you have so much of activity in head office, give me all to myself. It will become a United Motor State situation. You can't blame the law for that. Law can't give you a solution. You have to arrange your business to avoid a United Motor situation. That's the lesson which we need to pick it up. Don't involve two states. That's the sutra, you should have it in mind. If you involve a transaction with two states, then you know who will take the bread and who will leave you empty-handed. Don't get into that mode. It's one important suggestion I thought I should say. Then we'll come to composition, last 5-7 minutes, and then we'll take questions. This is the suggestion I would make on composition. Don't get into composition. Then you will be out of the league. Don't encourage purchase from exempted and threshold sectors. You first get out of this, and you don't encourage somebody to do it. I remember what happened. I was saying this in a few places. I'll say it one more time. All of us are familiar with this 1.5 crore, 3 crore SSI exemption. So a man from Tirupur came and said, sir, 3 crore I have exhausted myself. Exhausted through my wife, my son, daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, Sambandhi, everybody I have exhausted. I'm still doing this business. I still have turnovers to do. What do I do? Told him, you can repeat the second cycle, get married again and stop the process. So I met him after 6 months. I said, hope you are implementing my advice. He said, I've done it half. So I thought, oh, what a fool he is. So he has started the industry again in his wife's name. I got married the second time and yet to start the industry. So all these things won't work hereafter. See, once technology is in place, it ensures the effacement of evasion and possibly corruption to whatever extent. We still can be very inventive, our guys. But still, why do I say it will throw out evasion? E-commerce is an example. Cell phones, 8 out of 10 cell phones, last purchase were always done in black. We don't have the tendency to buy a phone by paying credit card. Olden days. Because that few hundred rupees matters a lot, not the few thousand rupees for the phone. Tendency. But what does e-commerce do? 70% of the e-commerce transaction is only cell phone sales. And it is sale to students, our daughters, our sons, etc., friends. Every now and then you get a blink in your phone. Your son would have swiped the card and said, deliver it at my home or deliver it at a place, unknown destination for a phone. Few thousand rupees. Idea is that transaction gets captured. So, cell phone sale is now accounted in India. Something which could not have happened without e-commerce. So technology will throw you, that's why they are talking about invoice matching. They want to track every stage of the supply, sitting in the boardroom. It's a laudable thought, but it will take time to implement. You have to start somewhere, ending point will take time. So this is exactly what is likely to happen when you do an integrated service. So we are in a era of technology. How long? This 75 lakhs threshold exemption, first of all, please understand, it is not available for service providers. It is only available for supplier of goods. Service providers cannot take threshold exemption. Panwalas, Bedawalas, some regional operators, you go it. But don't plan your business henceforth because your recipient will be technologically hooked. It puts four restrictions against you. Not available for services, not for interstate composition. You should not collect taxes. You cannot avail credit. These are the 4 disincentives attached to composition. Now, who will now opt for composition? So threshold and composition don't encourage. Take a call. As you grow big, you should allow your suppliers also to grow big. Let them rise up to the occasion through the GST regime. Let's all contribute whatever little or might we can possible to avoid evasion to happen in this country. So bring them under the technology network, therefore they don't do evasion. That's the whole idea of this law. So this is going to go that way. Then finally, yes, transition. I'll take the questions of whatever Shekhar has first asked and then take the other questions. See, transition, finally, I was very apprehensive because I was the one to brave it out to rest of the whole. But they have agreed to that. An elementary principle. Whether you are entitled to 100% credit or 40%, which is now 60%, what does the law say? It says, first clause in the law says, this is meant for people who have not taken registration. The law starts that way. Those who have not registered, if you are able to show a taxable invoice, then you are entitled for 100% credit. What is the fun in advising? No, you are not registered. Go and get registered now. You are not a fellow who will be registered under the old act at all. No, you should go and get registered. Raise one registered invoice, then give a credit. Why do you do all this? Where is the need? All you require is, if you are able to have a taxable invoice which can be correlated to the stock, whichever degree of the supply chain he may be. Correlation is the only essence of transition. Otherwise, the provision can't work. If you are able to show it, then you will have 100% credit. Have no doubts about it. All right. Then before I wind up and take the questions, I'll one more time request the trade and the trade body. The success of GST ultimately depends on the nascent stage, how GST Council cooperates with the trade at one end and with the states at the other end. Because the two unknown fears of technology and this tax administration, this can be sorted out only by an effective functioning of the GST. So GST has 3 major roles to play post July 1st. Empathetic, preventive, and remedial. At least for 1 year, no penalty. No penalty. That should be the law. Otherwise, it will simply fail. It will not only fail, it will fail them on several fronts. Canada, New Zealand, they've all brought GST, and the government which brought GST lost power. And this anti-profiteering rule, which he wanted me to talk, is essentially to contain inflation and to essentially contain and to ensure that the ultimate consumer is not I was saying, you set some new law. I thought I will start buying my goods at a lesser price. You said the rates have come down, but my consumption price and pattern remains the same. So why should I think of bringing you back to power? Purely for that reason. And economically, and even from a legislative structure, anti-profiteering, you can't run a GST provision without anti-profiteering. It's not possible. What does this law say on anti-profiteering? We'll wind up with that. It says, see, suppose your total assimilation of taxes till 30th June is in the order of 28 plus or 18 plus or 12 plus, wherever it is. If you have fallen into a bracket, a 28% goods has come to 18, or 18 to 12, or 12 to 5, or 5 to 0, reverse process. Then it requires you, even today, there is no harm in making the profits which you desire. There is no law to control on you are not running an essential commodities. So you can make whatever profit you want, but you must have cost records to demonstrate that you have not pocketed the tax reduction as part of, assimilated it as part of your profit in your books. This is something you need to demonstrate. This is all if you see the anti-profiting provision in the law, there is only one section for it, and it has to come through some rules. It's not a very complex section. They have left it quite wide and said that, and we are all used to this costing. Transfer pricing is only a legislation only of this nature. It's the most subjective law I have ever come across. I have not seen anybody can give any perspective to that law, any shape. You want to create a cat, you can create a cat. You want to create a dinosaur, you can create a dinosaur. It's possible. It is so subjective. Even that law has this proof. We are used to that proof. So you need to have that proof in your books. It's your burden. There must be a clear evidence to say the reduction in tax has been passed on to the consumer. Otherwise the consequences is bound to follow. And that's how it moves. Why should that profit be with you? Saying that I have a right, after all I am paying 12% on that 10%. That's not the point. 12% on 10% is what you give it to me. I want you to give the 10% benefit to the consumer. That's how government looks at it, or the draftsman looks at it. So anti-profiteering is one of the effective measures through which you implement the law. I'll just take Shekhar's question first, and then I can take whatever questions you want. Two things. Yes, under this regime, there is no bond, export by bond is now ruled out under the GST regime. It's not there because it's done with some idea. It's a policy decision. They want you to pay and claim rebate. One assurance is 90% has to be given in the first few days. Whether it will happen or not, let's see. Now that there is a provision, now you did not have a provision. See, these people are capable of saying, no, the semicolon is not there, date is not there, I have lost the invoice. It's like your client saying, if you just ring him up and say, what happened to the bill, your secretary, oh, we have lost the invoice, please send me the second invoice. So these guys can, okay. So all these things can come. How inventive they are going to be, let's see. At least now this law puts it up front and says you are given 90% even first before we talk about something else. So therefore rebate is the only route. 2, on the 57F job work, the 11th clarification by the GST Council and the classification of deemed manufacturer into processes and bringing them into the service category, I think has said now job worker, invariably they will not be supplier of goods. They will be supplier of services, pay 18% and then take credit. That clarification to a greater extent has given you...
I think I prefer Shekhar's explanation of God save the taxpayer. And actually it's God bless the tax consultant. Yeah. So, yeah, you see, my basic apprehension is this, that we are heading into a regime without adequate testing. We are going to have a huge problem. Like demonetization did tremendous collateral damage. Wherever I speak, I find great apprehensions and fears. If you read today's Business Standard, there's a huge outcry in Surat on what's going to happen to the textile industry. It's first of all, I never understood the need for GST, but anyway, it is coming. Like it's a marriage, inevitably you have to get married, you have to accept the whole thing and move on, something like that. But GST is coming, and as I say, as citizens, we should try our best to make it work. No point now complaining the train has left the station. We have to just see how far the journey can be made smooth. I personally felt that there should have been more amount of testing, more amount of trial runs than suddenly getting into it. Unfortunately, if you read Professor Vaidyanathan's book, India Unink, please read that book. Whether we like it or not, a large part of our economy is cash, a large part of our economy is unorganized. And my fear is how far these people will be able to get into the thing, I don't know. It's very easy to say don't buy from an unregistered dealer. What happens to these small businesses? If I buy from him, I pay 18% tax, I pay 28% tax. It's okay for us to sit in an air-conditioned hall and say don't buy from unregistered people. Where do those people go? They're very, very serious issues. And as I say, let's hope for the best. Let's make it as painless as possible. He has made a very important point that as far as possible, the GST Council should take into account. Speaking for myself, there are at least 17 critical issues which remain unanswered, 17, which are extremely critical but still remain unanswered. I don't know what will happen. I only hope that if we meet next year in June, let us see what will be the review of it. So you can all ask your questions and so on. And I think that if the Madras Chamber can today summarize important doubts and send it to the council as early as possible, that can be done. Thank you very much and wish you all the best. Hope you have a very good GST. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our request. Maybe now we can open the floor for questions. There are some questions which we have already forwarded to you. And, okay, fine, super. We can just make it open. You can be brief and then the questions could be very pointed. Thank you.
Sir, for the enlightening lecture. In fact, I have two questions and I'll make it very short. The first thing is I am borrowing from Mr. Parasaran's 5-minute intervention in the Rajya Sabha, where he traced the etymology of the word tax itself, both from an Oriental and an Occidental perspective. Oriental quoting Valmiki and Kalidasa saying that it has to be 1/6. If you look at the figures, the spectrum of figures in the tax and the services and supplies included, maybe the arithmetic can be 16%, but still nobody has done that analysis to say that it will all zero down to 16% on an average. But the Occidental perspective, the etymology says tax means touch. Looks like there is a variety of services. You said that, 28% because it's white good, but it is not touch, whether it is white good or any good. A tax has to be touch-based. It looks like it is more a squeeze-based tax. It's not a touch-based tax. So are we, fundamentally have we understood the principles of taxation itself when such a major transformation is happening? Maybe we've lost an opportunity to understand what tax is. The second question, as Mr. Dattar pointed out, a lot of critical concerns raised in the councillors, they are still unaddressed. And in my particular case, they have clearly exempted the auxiliary educational services from GST ambit, but for education institution, but stopped it only up to high school education and said higher education institutions, you have to pay the GST. Why this discrimination? Because you cautioned that we cannot, challenge this based on the constitutionality. But I feel that this is on a principle of constitutionality, that there is discrimination in education. High school or higher education, education is education.
I'll take the second question first. I have issued a clarification to him, but I agree. We and Vaidya share, many times we agree and sometimes we disagree. I feel that his higher education continues to remain only under the exempted sector, under the notification, because the principal clause says so. There is a proviso which restricts it. There is an ambiguity, of course. There is an ambiguity because the proviso talks something from the principal clause. But a plain reading, according to me, even higher education continues to remain under the exempted bracket. Yeah, the same subclass 6 which we discussed. Anyhow, we will see whether they will resolve it. How effectively you put it also, that's why I say, if you have a genuine grievance, for example, writ reading is one genuine grievance. It's not individuals who address, they won't look into it. That's exactly the role. As much as GST Council has to play its role, trade bodies have a larger role in the next 1 year. You need to represent it only through a body. Otherwise, how do you filter? Your complaint may be genuine, but 10 complaints may be ingenuine. Where is the time for them to sort it out? Better to expose your views through a common platform. It might get captured. It is getting captured. Many a times they are addressing. This is one. As far as the second is concerned, see, we are used to a taxation regime where we have been paying 34% indirect taxes. 34%, 16% excise duty, minimum 12% VAT, plus MAT, SAT, CAT, all those. It is 33, 34% duty. Many of them have been brought to 12 and 18. So, applying Ramayana, 1/6, all residuary items are 18%, which is 1/6. So, we have to either you stick to Shastra and try it out. The advantage of sticking to Shastra is you will get the result. Shastras will never fail. But the downside of Shastra, you should understand, is it's extremely painful and you will get the result only when you don't want it. It takes so much time. The tangible examples are Ravana and Duryodhana. And Shastras say that. They say rogues will rule. Rogues will get status, power, wealth, recognition, everything. But they will finally see downfall in their life. But people who stand by penance will suffer pain, shame, everything, but they will finally succeed. Bliss. So it's choice. So when you do a practical analysis of 18%, see one thing, let me be very clear, I am talking as a professional because we are in an era of polarization. Either you talk for, you talk against, you are branded immediately. This 18%, 12%, you look at it from collection point. You need to get your resources to run the country. You can't say everything from 6.5 lakhs will come down to 3. How do you bridge the gap? And the white good industry is very unhappy, and this is the reason. Somewhere somebody has to pay for the rest, and white goods industries are no pay. That's all.
Two short questions. One on this anti-profiteering. Now we are supplying to our customers. We are in the process of tracking what is the present taxes. For example, the CST is presently, it is a cost. Reversal of VAT credit is also a cost. Way forward, it should not be a cost, we have to pass it on. So similarly, tier 1, tier 2, we go back. Supposing if we are unable to realize the benefit, or if it is not passed on to us, because the anti-profiteering says the increase in credit or reduction in taxes, it should be in commensurate, it should be passed on to the, till it reaches the ultimate consumer. For some reasons, if I am unable to realize the benefit from my tier 2 or tier 3, am I forced to pass it on even then to my customer? That is one. Number two, it's a different question. I am registered. Just because I am registered, whatever I purchase, the goods or services from an unregistered dealers, I need to pay the taxes. For example, assuming I am a service provider, I go and buy a tea from a tea vendor. So should I have to pay taxes for that? So that is one thing, a difficult proposition. Just I thought I can take your views on this. Thank you.
Tea is supply of goods.
Sorry?
Tea is supply of goods.
The second question or first question?
No, I'm talking about the second question.
Okay.
See, it's, yeah.
For example, we are in the evening time, we buy snacks.
Now, let's put the bottom line clear. If you buy from a threshold supplier, reverse charge will apply. So the obligation to pay tax is on you. So it's your choice. You can. See, when I say don't encourage, it's not, see, this unorganized industry, retrading is a typical example. It's completely, you have only two extreme industries. They are either branded guys or they are unorganized. There is no via media at all. Now, because of 28%, we showed statistics to say it will kill the branded guys and allow unorganized to flourish. Then they brought it under 18. So, you don't, I agree, where it is not possible, you have to only encourage, you encourage. Choice is yours. But in an era of technology where you need to synchronize yourself, if you are going to buy from an unregistered dealer and then pay on reverse charge, how far government is going to recognize your credentials is something which you have to take a call. It's up to you. Take a call. But it will all be under reverse charge. Now, anti-profiteering, in fact, your question is a well-concerned question. In 4 supply chains, you are in the bottom. Should I have to refer to the cost pattern? I think the courts will try to give you a relief to this extent. You are concerned about your cost. So if you open it from your cost and say that this is the price I have received and these are the inflictions which is part of cost and these are prices which is not part of cost, to that extent, I think onus will get discharged. They can't tell you to say you have to prove your anterior 4 stages on anti-profiteering. He has an obligation to prove that to his officer because the same law operates also to him. Yeah. So it will be only for your segment of purchase and segment of sale, not in your entire supply chain starting from the manufacturing point. That will be a reasonable interpretation which courts are likely to extend is what I feel.
Thank you.
Sir, my name is Gokul Dikshit here. 2 questions. One question is, the inverted duty structure, take for example tractors, they are going to be taxed at 12%. But most of the components are taxed, input components are taxed either at 18 or 28%. And the law says that therefore because it's inverted duty structure, you are entitled to get a refund. Well and good, it's very fair. But it appears as though if the final product here being tractors 12%, but if the final product is milk or curd, which is actually 0%, it's exempt. Whatever my input taxes are there, for example, I might buy condensed milk which is being taxed at 18%, and condensed milk is nothing but removing water out of milk. That process undergoes 18% taxation. Because your final product is exempt, it appears as though you are not entitled to a refund. Because the ultimate product is 0% and not 12%. Why this stepmotherly treatment for an exempt product, although I am paying differential duty structure there? That is the first question. Second question, I will give you an example. Suppose I am a sugar manufacturer. I get sugar cane, I manufacture it, and finally the bagasse, which is the waste which is there. I use that in my boiler for capital power production. To the extent that that power is supplied back to TNEB, am I required to reverse any input credit that I have received? So this is
See, the second question is pending in the larger bench of the Supreme Court. Maruti has been referred to a larger bench and it is pending, and we'll have to await the decision on that. Sit down, please. As far as the first question is concerned, see, this is the policy of the law. If your product is exempt, then you move out of the credit scheme. So a zero rated product, when I say zero rated, not export, an exempted product which is zero cannot subsume at all. So you can't make a bonanza merely because your subsequent supply chain is an exempt. See, inverted duty structure is only to, it's a remedial, it's a remedy to ensure some lapses, if any here and there, gets ironed out. What is the purpose of this provision? Normally, a rate will follow either same or higher. That's the presumption of law. But suppose you have been suffering 18% in the first three supply chain, and suddenly it becomes 12. Earlier, Eastern Motor says the credit will lapse. If suppose they issue a notification, they have upheld it, credit will lapse. But now this GST law says, if your ultimate, your purchaser is going to pay on an inverter structure, difference will be given back to you. It goes on the presumption, A, it is taxable, and unfortunately, he is paying a lesser tax. So the supply chain should not be suffering that burden, and therefore we will refund it. You can't say, I will extend it for an exempted goods also. It will be strainful and burdensome, and that does not meet with the policy. Somebody is exempted, then he subsumes it. He cannot subsume it. That's the essence of the law, which has been so for 30 years. I don't say you should extend it. It's not going to validate or given a larger benefit or a bonanza to an exempted industry. Law will not encourage it, is what I feel at this point of time.
Yes, sir. I have two questions, sir. If suppose I have a unit in area-based exemption area, and presently I am not paying any excise duty, neither I am getting input credits and all. But under the GST regime, I have to fall into that chain. I have to pay the duties, and I will avail the input credit also. But what about the delta, which I am enjoying, and I have been given a relaxation up to 10 years. Suppose I have a 3 years period is there, still I have to get and all.
Where is the delta here? No law after 1st July.
Sir, if suppose I will pay...
See, saving clause is there. I mean, I don't have an answer straight away. Let's check it up. Whether the saving clause will save you for this unexpired period of exemption, it won't, because there's no excise duty for you to pay. You are all in a new era. It goes. And let me make it very clear. Whenever there is a new avatar coming, subsuming the old, that's why we put it. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? Some will perish. See, even in a war, even in a love, with all these things are bound to happen. Some will get affected. We only test the sense of neutrality in saying whether the large majority has been addressed with. They appear to be doing something. So let me be clear, I don't see any delta continuing after 1st July. That's my answer. Okay. There's no excise duty for delta to continue.
So the next question, sir. Today my depots are having the stock of that exempted units. So can I get the deemed credit of 60%?
Which one?
My several depots are there. I have an exempted unit as well as I have a duty paid unit and all. My depot is holding the stocks as on 1st July. Then can I take a deemed credit of that 60%?
I will again check up and tell, but I will presume at the moment, I think they are giving this benefit for tax paid goods where you don't have invoices.
Yeah.
Not allowing exempted goods also to have, that's not that iron and steel regime. That's not the regime which they have understood it in 143. That's my immediate answer, but I'll check up and tell. I don't want to make off the cuff. I don't think exempted goods are covered under 143. That's my prima facie feeling at this point of time. Lack of evidence reduces your benefit from 100 to, see, I think that's the answer. That's the answer. Shekhar says, the new amendment, they are saying unconditional exemptions, you will not get it. You can't take deemed credit. Conditional exemptions, you can take deemed credit of 60%.
Okay.
So area-based exemptions or conditional exemptions or unconditional exemptions is what. So he says, if you may come under the basket of unconditional exemptions and therefore you may be entitled to 60% is what he shares.
Similarly with the next supply chain, that is dealers. Dealers will have a stock of mixed stock. They will have only commercial invoice. There no condition of conditional exemption, unconditional goods and all. They can't.
No, conditional, unconditional is traceable to the goods, not to the purchase. So they are the origin of the goods because they are excise duty paid goods. The exemption related to excise duty. Yeah, but now this new amendment Shekhar says they have brought an insertion. When they see, now they have clarified, they have clarification. This 143 is going for clarification. Now they have said 100%, and one of the sub rule, one of the sub classification is if you are unconditionally exempt, then nothing. Not so, then you get 60%. You get exempted.
Sir, I understand these exports. You have to pay duty and then wait for the refund. How about supplies coming into SEZ and export going out of SEZ?
SEZ is export. Same law. SEZ geographically is located in India, but customs law apply.
Right. It is
So
supposed
it's an
to be.
export. It is at par with a physical export. Unlike an EOU,
Right.
the difference between an EOU and an SEZ, EOU is deemed export. SEZ is a physical export, though located in India. That's the basic difference.
So exports going out of SEZ?
Exports going out of SEZ to either out physical geographical territory will
Fine.
be export only for them.
But notionally, that is, once you export it to SEZ, then again it is not an export out of SEZ.
So SEZ receives it.
That is a export, first export.
And it does as a manufacturing, you are doing, no, I'll answer that.
Fine.
Whether it's a merchant exporter or a manufacturing
Manufacturing export.
manufacturing undergoes a change, a new product.
Fine.
So he becomes a fresh exporter. If he's a merchant exporter, then the SEZ rules are different.
Right.
One Sridharan, you see here, he has written a very long question. I would like to hear the question itself. Bird cell.
Mike.
The branch in Delhi is executing jobs in various states, wherein at present they have registered on the bank. Of course, you have already cleared, don't do IGST transaction. I think my question is answered. Still, I want to know whether the Delhi branch can do execute jobs in various states under IGST. I think you have already told me how that is good. The same, no?
Yeah. See, avoid IGST as possible. Your state, it's like BEPS. Whether you want it or not, if BEPS is going to be in place, you must follow BEPS. You can't say, BEPS is there, but I still not follow, then face the consequences. Hereafter, economic activity, location and tax, like what the sutra which our seniors taught in 86 on SENVAT credit, goods, invoice and use should converge. This is the sutra for SENVAT credit, MOD-VAT credit. Same thing, location, activity and tax should be destination based. Otherwise, you are involving two states. Two states means one, same.
Sir, I am Sumar, sir. Sir, our company is importing goods from outside country and they are storing in a warehouse. And whenever they are required, they will remove from warehouse to our factory. Now, the issue is in the transitional because we are paying the warehouse rent also. Now, how do we take the same credit, sir? Because the goods is not received as on 30th June. And the factory also has got a location constraint. The goods will be removed from warehouse whenever they required. So, as far as the transitional portion, how do we get that credit?
Can you make that your warehouse before 30th?
No, sir, we don't have warehouse, sir. We are paying.
Where are the goods? It can't be in here. Where is it?
It is stored in warehouses, sir. We are paying rent for the goods.
Correct. So you have a warehouse in which goods are stored.
Yes, sir.
For transition credit, you can think of 143, but on rental, you have a rental agreement on which you are paying service tax on that.
Yes.
What is it?
But the goods suffered import duty, sir. That is environmental we have taken, but the goods are not received to the factory. Goods is lying in warehouse only. Yes.
I think for goods in transit, they have given 30 days time and another 30 days continuation from the commissioner. So you have to inward within 60 days and avail the credit. The CVD and CVD will be available as CGST and SAD as SGST.
There is a time for 60 days.
If your stocks are going to be beyond 60 days, then you have made an imprudent purchase. Sir. Hello. Sir, I avoided it carefully because no, they are trying to take a call tomorrow. So let's wait, and any noise now should not create any problems there. They are looking at it quite. Yeah. So that's the call. We will wait, sir. We are just thinking, hoping that they will take a sensible decision on it. They want to capture the transaction rather than allowing it in bond. That looks to be the logic. Everything should be on tax payment. That's the mode in which they want to convert. It's a policy call. After 1 year, if it doesn't work, they may restore bond. It's possible. But today they want to operate in that mode and try it out.
So this main purpose of removing this word goods from the definition of works contract. The purpose of removing the word goods from the definition of works contract, what is the intention? What is the idea behind that?
I didn't notice the way you have noticed it. I only thought movables are moved out of works contract. You are saying goods are moved out of works contract. What will remain there? No, they are. See, at the dividing line today, as I said, you have a problem. Works contract movable goods will now go into composite supply. I mean, that you bear it in mind. You need to structure your contracts very carefully, sir. When especially turnkey contracts of installation of plant and machinery will need to be reviewed because of this definition under GST.
Sir, in a works contract, can we issue a separate invoice for supply of goods and service separately?
If it is a mixed supply, you are entitled to issue separate invoice, separate line items. But for testing a composite supply, it's not invoicing. Testing a supply, it's a natural bundling. That's the expression used by the legislation. If your execution is a natural bundling, then putting any number of divisible contracts is not going to help. See, for example, you have a contract for supply and you have a contract for installation. You have a cross-fall breach clause together. Then under this GST dispensation, it will be a composite supply. They will say you are naturally bundled because non-performance of one leads to a breach of contract in the other. Then you integrate it. However, dissection, bill-wise, item-wise you may make. That's why I said all turnkey contracts requires a reorientation and a realignment under the new GST regime. You may still go back to the old, but review it and then go back. Don't take it lightly. You will be up for surprises.
Thank you.
On this, supplementing the car dealer, he repairs the car and give 2 bills now. One for goods, it suffers VAT and excise duty also. And for service, now they put 15%. So post GST, it should be considered as a composite supply, and he has to charge 28%.
Yeah, whether it, now the point is this, in an AMC contract, it's a very interesting question, what Shekhar, I'll develop it little, expand it a little more. AMC contract, whether it is under the principal supply contract of composite supply, whether it will be considered as a service contract or a supply contract, AMC. So, if you enter into a contract with parts as bill of materials, it is still a natural bundling, but the supply of parts predominates over the service, and therefore there is a possibility to say that bundling is natural and it's a composite supply, and therefore, but still a supply contract of goods chargeable at 28. But if your contract says I will do service, incidentally supply goods to you, and there is no identification at all, the sum total is for a price of an execution, can't you not argue that the principal contract is for service, even though there is a necessity to supply parts? 28, it's better to pay 28 so that it's trouble free. But this small window is available in AMC. In AMC, where there is no identification, see, there are contracts. It's like in a car contract, the most important part will be left out in the AMC. So, it's a question of how you design. Sir, it's a contract-driven law, and we are used to it in service tax. If you do this, it is this contract. If you do this contract. All this is done in the past for 20 years. So, you can decide whichever way it goes in the composite supply. But they will apply please understand one ground rule. Whichever is the highest rate, revenue will apply that as the principal class. I'll give you an example. You supply taxable goods and you do transportation. That's the example given in the illustration. Supply of goods followed by transportation, taxable. Then pays tax on the supply of goods, they're going to take it. Supply of milk, exempted. And transportation, I won't be surprised if an officer says transportation is the principal contract, supply of milk in a container is incidental. Such debates will come. But you must be clear to identify what your principal supply is. It will not be a non-interpretative, non-litigation era. Please, all of us will have to survey for some more years, it will be there. You can't rule it out. But only thing is, it will all be centered around interpretative issues. Never try constitutional issues in tax hereafter. 15 years gestation, investment will be more than the tax compliance, including lawyer's cost.
So I have two questions.
Up to your point, good point.
I have two specific questions. So under 140 subsection 3, from a transition perspective, I am a works contractor. Today I am discharging service tax on valuation mechanism under Rule 2A, if it's original works and other than original works. So I am not entitled to a credit of inputs on my ED and all that. So 140 subsection 3 does not cover my type of entity. It says works contract and people paying under notification 26 of 2012, which are basically the builders and developers. Query is whether I will be entitled to a credit of, say I have stock on 30th June of steel, cement and all. Can I take credit of my ED that I pay on my steel cement as on June 30th by quoting 143? This is my first question. Second is, under the GST regime, supplies to an SEZ unit or a developer is a zero-rated transaction. Now, if and section 9.3 of the CGST Act 9.3 and 9.4 says, if an entity purchases from an unregistered dealer, the recipient has to pay tax under RCM and take credit of it. Suppose in a situation wherein the SEZ unit purchases goods from unregistered dealer, goods or services from an unregistered dealer, will the SEZ unit pay tax and take credit? I think this will defeat the purpose because under today's regime, there are court rulings like Torrent Energy from Gujarat High Court, which is said that purchase tax will not apply for an SEZ unit. Obviously, today's Gujarat laws have the non-standing laws and all that. But in GST regime from the BAL reading, the non-standing provision is not there. When you compare section 16 of IGST Act and Section 9.
I will answer your second question. First question, transitional expert will answer. Shekhar will answer transition provisions. First question. Can you make your question again to Shekhar on transition?
Yeah, I'll just repeat it once again.
Yes.
Section 140, subsection 3.
Yeah.
I am a works contractor paying tax on valuation mechanism. Rule 2A1, 2A2, depending whether it is original works or other than original works.
Yeah.
Under today's regime, I am not entitled to a credit of the excise duty because the rule specifically disallows me that. In the GST regime, as on 30th June, I have stock of steel and cement. Section 140, subsection 3 uses the word works contractors and notification 26 of 2012. I am not covered under the specific category. So, can I take the credit of this excise duty that is there on the steel and cement, which is lying on stock as on June 30th?
No, the stock, it is not lying with the dealer's premises.
I am a works contractor.
So it is your own stock.
Yes.
If you strictly interpret the rules, you are not entitled.
Yes, but I'll
because the same problem is faced by all the automobile manufacturers who have the stock in their depots. If they have sold to the dealers, then dealer will have a commercial invoice and he will be in a position to get the deemed credit of 60%. So what stand we have taken is either we must have the vehicles uncleared stored it within the plant for clearance under GST or sell it before 1st July. Otherwise, it will be a cost. We have made several representations on this point. Let us hope we will get some favorable reply tomorrow. And they say even not tomorrow is the last meeting. Another meeting, I believe, even before 1st July.
Second question, I think being an SC is that why are you buying from unregistered?
Supposing a situation.
Then reverse charge. Suffer the consequence of reverse charge.
Section 52 and all will today SEZ has a provision of override.
Yeah. But
all that will continue or
some court is going to say you are encouraging purchase. See, how will revenue put it? I am looking at it this way. If I were an additional Solicitor General, I will, on instructions and government, try to pitch and say that we are discouraging purchasers and that's why we brought reverse charge. And when somebody is encouraging reverse charge, you should pay the consequence. Judge will hold it. See, you must understand, see, judicial interpretation is also like theme writing, song writing and film making. The film and the texture and the way it was made in 1960 is not made in 2017. Interpretation also undergoes changes. The mindset. So don't write. You either don't buy, if it is academic, I leave you, spare you. If it is non-academic, pay the taxes.
Yeah.
Last question.
Section 51 talks about tax rational growth. Because the government plans to mandate somebody to tax. What is the situation? What is the background?
No. In e-commerce, I'll explain it because we are doing all that. See, this TCS is only for e-commerce because the stand which we have been taking in courts, which is also right. E-commerce doesn't buy and sell. What does e-commerce do? It's a platform. It's like matrimony. They don't marry, they arrange marriages. So they arrange, all dealers register in the portal, buyers log for the orders, dealers sell it to the buyers, service charge is collected for doing the service. But the economic activity principally is triggered only by the e-commerce industry. So GST says, you are the principal man. Buyers, see, in an e-commerce, unlike non-e-commerce, in non-e-commerce, there is a supply chain and consumer is the last. Whereas in e-commerce, it cuts out the supply chain and goes directly to the consumer. Consumer cannot be taxed. Dealer will pay tax so far because it is origin based. Now it's become destination based. So now they are saying e-commerce industry will take the responsibility and then do this thing. This is the essence of this.
It's a collection of tax, as it is income tax. But Section 51 talks about dealers, rational growth. It is saying that it is mandate government or some category of percent to deduct 12% from the payment which is made to the supplier. So that section is different from the e-commerce operation.
TDS, I think Supreme Court has upheld it both under indirect tax and indirect tax. It's only a mechanism to facilitate capture. That's the essence of TDS. So this facilitates that because ultimate consumer is not paying taxes. That's the essence of it. Whether you collect it at the source or at the point of dispatch, the e-commerce industry now is trusted with the obligation to register and pay. In fact, so much of time was invested by the industry to see whether this operation can be disjointed in a very, very legalistic way, so that they get over the mandate of 52. After all, PPT, non-PPT, mails, hills, I finally said, after all this effort you implement, next day they will amend the law to bring such a transaction into tax. So you just see whether it's worth it or not. And the industry dropped it out. All of them are falling in line and doing this. They are complying with 51 and 52 from 1st July. That's the call by the industry.
So one more question. What is the GST impact on the partner salary and the amount paid to the article staff or apprentice trainee or management trainees? So in excess of your share of profit in case of partners and the apprentice, what would be the impact? Because they qualify as an unregistered person, what would be the impact of partnership firms?
See, it is not an employee-employer. So it's in the nature of a consultation. Okay. So the consequences will therefore follow.
So the firm would end up in paying
reverse charge, because he's an individual.
So the same concept will apply to the articles and management trainees.
Whereas if you make him, see whether reverse charge will apply, suppose he is treated as a consultant, then his salary, if partner share is going to be beyond the threshold of 20 lakhs, then you will have to, if he doesn't pay reverse charge. But if you are, what you give to the articles, if you are a very generous dispenser who pays more than 20 lakhs to your article guy, then I think you pay the tax also. But if it's going to be less than that, then he gets the benefit of a threshold. Threshold should be read even on a reverse charge. Unregistered, yeah, to that extent it applies. When you are a taxable entity, that's the problem. When you are a taxable person, his threshold may not impose on you, even though, he is under threshold, you are a taxable person, his salary will be taxed and reverse charge.
Yes, that's the question.
Because then you make him an employee for those months and bring him under Schedule 3. Try for it. Mudiman Paranga, I mean, I don't know. If he is an employer-employee relationship, then Schedule 3 protection.
No, specifically in case of CA firms, definitely the articles cannot deem to be an employee of the firm, correct? So that is a peculiar situation.
See, what a disincentive. They are discouraging you to pay the article. Reverse charge varu, sir. Reverse charge varu.
That is a point
which issue you have to flag off.
Yes, that is a point which were given in the tweets also. They mentioned like on the partner salary in articles, you end up in paying tax. But it affects a lot.
In fact, this is a genuine case. I think you should take it up. I mean,
there is a point to be taken up. That's why the...
Hey, ICA is a very powerful body in GSTR. You can take it up. You are a very, very powerful contributor to GST Council.
Thank you.
But you have flagged off a right answer.
Thank you so very much. I think we should thank Mr. N. Venkataraman for the time he had taken, the interest he has taken. In fact, for the last 15 days, I think almost every day, 3 times a day we have been speaking, or he has been calling me to check the queries, the things, other arrangements, everything. That is the interest he had shown. And thank you so very much, sir. And if you have no problem, we have recorded the whole thing. Can we provide the link in our website?
Please do.
Okay, fine. We will provide a link so that even the members who couldn't participate today, we will send a circular so that all of them take the benefit.
I was very particular about one thing I told Saraswati. We have been working for each one of you for several decades. Now you are in a transition to a new law. So it's our duty as individual and as chamber to finally say what this law is likely to be in just 2 weeks' time, to give you a model big picture.
True.
So we have done only our duty to you, we owe it to you. We have learned so many things from you all these years, and it's just a question of indebtedness and gratitude, which we have tried to do. All the very best. Please pay taxes, please maintain documents, and don't worry. Your problem is also the problem for the rest of India, so you will not be punished. Don't have that fear, and put your foot forward with all the faith. Good luck.
Thank you so much. And I think probably what cannot be cured should be endured. So our time to start enduring GST would be there in another 2 weeks' time. And from the chamber, we have taken the takeaway very clearly. I think we would be very, very happy because already we have something like our expert corners and all. We would open a separate window. So all your questions on GST concern, please flag it there. We will appropriately take it up with experts like Mr. N. Venkataraman and all others who are there, Mr. Shekhar, and our entire team and even external experts if required. And at least try to do our best. As you said, already 17 critical issues are pending. Let us see how many more we could add and how many more would get solved. As somebody was saying, when we compare it to the earlier VAT, central excise eras, this is a Bahubali. That's what he said. So let us all gear up. Have a good weekend. Thanks to everyone who had spared time. The lunch is served in the basement. Please do join.
Thank you so much.
What? Yeah, please. Sorry, Envy sir. Envy, we have a small memento to you. Very, very small memento. Thank you. Shekhar, please.
அவன் ஞாபகம் இருக்கானே